Today I'm going to be showing you the fastest and easiest way to install Klipper on your Ender 3, Ender 3 Pro, or pretty much any Ender line printer. However, the instructions for this video will specifically be covering the Ender 3 Pro, but I'll give some information on what to do if you have a different model. So the main difference here from the last video was I was using a Raspberry Pi 4B, but this time I'm using a Raspberry Pi 02W from RasTech. Now these can be had for a lot cheaper than a Raspberry Pi 4 Model B, but they're going to get the job done just as good. To make life just a little bit easier, I also picked up a kit from RasTech that this board came with that has everything you need for this install, except for one SD card, but it already comes with another SD card, which we'll be using mainly in the printer from now on. So without any further hesitation, let's open the box, see what's inside, and then let's get to installing Klipper on this thing and on this thing here. Let's open up this RasTech Raspberry Pi 02W kit and see what comes inside. So right away we can see we've got our Raspberry Pi 02W right here. It also comes with this nice housing. It also comes with this AC to DC adapter, micro USB power supply with a switch, so you can turn it on and off whenever you need. It also comes with this micro USB OTG adapter, so you can plug in any full-size USB-A device into your Raspberry Pi. And it comes with this pin header for the GPIO pins as well. It also comes with an HDMI cable, which is great if you want to use this as an emulator or anything where you need video out. You don't have to worry about getting another HDMI cable. It comes with a micro SD card reader to USB, which is easy to plug into any computer. It also comes with a 32 gigabyte micro SD card, and it's a class 10 A1 SD card, so it's nice and fast. And lastly, we got this little heat sink here, which will be helpful in dissipating the heat that the processor on this unit is going to be putting off. Now you might see my Ender 3 Pro and say, hey, that looks a little bit different than mine, and that's okay because I use this to print mostly in a heated enclosure for some specific parts, and for that to happen I need the power supply and the main board outside of the printer for it. So the process will still be exactly the same for you, even though your setup may look a little bit different. So now that that's all out of the way, we're going to take this micro SD card, plug it into the computer, and then get this formatted and ready to have Klipper on here. That way we can flash the Raspberry Pi with Klipper on it and then get everything ready before we have to get to the printer. So let's go to the computer now. Now that we're on the computer side of things, go ahead and put your SD card into your computer and head over to raspberrypi.com/software. Link will be in the description below, and we're going to install the Raspberry Pi Image Manager. You can go ahead and download it for your selected operating system. For this install, we'll be using Windows, and once you have it installed, you can open it up, and then we're going to come over to this website, docs-os.mainsail.xyz. Link will be in the description as well. And what we're going to do is we're going to hit the Getting Started, go with the Raspberry Pi OS based, and then we're going to follow along from what this website says. We've already got the Raspberry Pi Imager, so we're going to do what it says to do here, and what that is go to Choose OS. Then we're going to scroll down to Other Specific Purpose OS, and we're going to click 3D Printing, and then we're going to click Mainsail OS, and we're going to use a 32-bit installation here because this one doesn't have 4 gigs of RAM. There's really not a whole lot of benefit to go to 64-bit, especially for a simple Mainsail installation. So we're going to click this, and then our storage is going to be the SD card. I'm using the one that came with the RasTech kit, and before we hit write, we have to add some options in. So we can head over to the settings key. We're going to set our host name here, and for this I'm just going to call it Ender 3 Pro. We're going to enable SSH, use password authentication, and for a username we're going to put in Pi. That just makes life a lot easier. And then choose a password that fits your needs. I'm choosing that one. Next, we're going to configure wireless LAN. You can put your SSID in and your password. Our wireless LAN country you can set for yours. Mine is going to be US. And then we can set our locale setting so it gets the time and date correct. This one's correct for mine. We can leave these as default. Click Save. And now we're going to hit Write. You can hit Yes to this. This should just take a few minutes to get done. You'll get some of these windows popping up, and that's completely normal. You can just hit Cancel on that. Hit OK. Hit Cancel. That's all fine. Continue. And we can now remove the SD card from the computer. So now that we've got Mainsail OS on this SD card, we're going to put it into our Raspberry Pi and then turn this on, and that way Mainsail OS will now be on this board. So what we're going to do here is we're going to put the SD card onto the board. And now's a good time to put the case on and everything else that we need. For this specific installation, I'm not going to be using any of the GPIO pins, so I won't be soldering the header to it. But what we will use is this case here. When installing heat sinks, what I always like to do is take an alcohol pad and just clean off where we're going to install the heat sink on. And in this case, it's the processor here. I'm going to let it dry, and then we're going to take the adhesive backing off of this little heat sink and pop it onto that processor. And then I'm going to hold down for about 30 seconds with some medium pressure. And don't worry that it doesn't cover the entire chip, because this doesn't really put off a whole lot of heat, and this will be sufficient to cool it for what we need it for. And now we're going to put the case on, and to do that, we're going to take the screws that came with the kit and little spacers in there, and we're going to put a screw here, spacer there, another screw here. It might be easier just to set this down to do this. And then another spacer. And now that we have that set over like that, we're going to take the board, make sure it's going in the right direction, which will be like this. And then we're going to put the board down. And then we're going to put the back on. And then we're going to put these nuts onto the screws. You can get them finger tight, that way when you flip it around, you can tighten it down without worrying about the screws falling out. Or if you have a tiny Phillips head screwdriver, you can go ahead and use that, or you can use a number 0 in a standard size screwdriver, and then just kind of tighten it up. And you can pretty much just hold the nut with your finger, or you could use a tiny socket or pliers just to hold the nut. But we're not going to tighten this down too much at all, because this will be staying stationary where it is, and I don't see these backing out anytime soon. So now that we've got this assembled, let's power it on. So we're going to take our power supply that this RasTech kit came with, we're going to plug it into either one of these USB ports, and we're going to turn it on, and we should see some lights. Give it a couple of minutes. This light's going to flash a bit, which means that this is pretty much picking up the data from here and writing the flash to the Raspberry Pi itself. So after about 2 or 3 minutes, you'll be good to go. And to test it, we can go over to the computer. But before we do that, we're going to grab another SD card. That way we can make a Klipper firmware to flash onto the printer. So let's head back to the PC, see if the Raspberry Pi is working, and then create a Klipper flash file for the Ender 3 Pro. And once we're back over to the computer, you can insert your USB drive and make sure it's formatted to FAT32. And now that it's formatted, we're going to need to grab another application. So go on over to putty.org, another link will be in the description below for this, and you're going to click Download Putty. Find the version that best suits your needs. For most installations, it will probably be this if you're on Windows. So you can download this, and once it's downloaded, go ahead and open it. Before we set up the Putty session, what we're going to do is we're going to find the IP of the Raspberry Pi we just flashed. Although we did just assign it a host name, I always prefer using an IP, as that seems to be the better method when connecting with Putty. So to do that, we're going to go back into our browser, and then we're going to put in the host name that we used when we were creating the flash on the Raspberry Pi imager. For this instance, it was ender3pro.local. If for some reason that using the host name doesn't work, and sometimes it might not, you can always go over to your router and then find the host name that you put in to see where it is on the network, and then just go directly to the IP from there. So for when you first load in Mainsail, you're going to get all these errors, and that's not a problem at all. There's a couple things we can configure while we're in here to make life a little easier. Let's go over to Machine, and then we're going to need to create a config file. The easiest thing to do here is to hit this drop-down option. We can go to Config Examples, and in Config Examples, we can search for the printer that we've got, which is the Ender 3 Pro. However, since mine has a CRTouch, none of these files will really work for my installation, so what we're going to do is go over here. A link will be in the description below for this exact config file. I have the 4.2.7 board, and what we can do now is we can click this raw button here, hit Control A, Control C, go over back to Mainsail, and then go into config here, and what we're going to do is we're going to create a file. We're going to call it printer.cfg. We will click create, and then we're going to go into printer.cfg, and we're going to paste it. One thing to note is you're going to need the config file specific to your board. Since mine's a 4.2.7, this config file will work for me. If you have a different board, you need to search for one with your board, and believe me, there's pretty much every combination out there for yours. In here, you'll also see that it has some information about what we need to do next when we make the Klipper firmware flash file for the board, and we'll get to that in just a minute. But before we do, we're also going to do something to make Mainsail happy. We're going to have a bracket here, and we're going to type in the brackets, include mainsail.cfg. And what that does is tell this configuration file to reference this Mainsail file. That way we have all our macros that we need. So what we'll do is we'll click save and restart. It'll just take a few seconds to restart. That's okay that we have this here. We can always change that in a little bit. But if you get this as well and you're concerned about it now, we can always hop into printer.config, and we're going to go down to the BLTouch section. And the Z offset here is something that we're going to calibrate soon, but to start with the Z offset, we'll just start with 0.0 so it won't throw any errors. We'll click save and restart, and if you run into this issue as well, we can go over to the aliases and the board pins. And to fix that error, we can go down here where it says board pin aliases, and we can do an asterisk, comma, same thing. And then we're going to put that exact same thing right on this line here. Click save and restart. And now it seems to be a little happier. That's just a little quirk with later versions of Klipper. I imagine that this config file might have been created during an older version of Klipper. So another thing we're going to want to do is update everything. So from this machine page here, we can click check for updates. And once it's done checking for updates, what we can do is click update all components. And this will just take a few minutes to get everything, and it will restart Klipper once it's done. You may see this come up, and you can just click try again, and the updating is now fully done. You can go ahead and click close. So now all the fun stuff is done over here. We can finally go into Putty, and we're going to take the IP address here. You can always assign this as a static IP address from your router settings as well. We're going to leave that at port 22 SSH, and we're going to name this Ender 3 Pro, or whatever you'd like to name it as well. Then we're going to click save, and then we're going to open. You can accept this pop-up. Then we're going to log in as Pi, and the password that you chose to use in the setup. And we can change the directory to Klipper by using cd, and then Klipper. And now that we're in the Klipper directory, what we're going to do is type make menu config, hit enter, and what we're going to use for this is what we had over here in our config file. So go to printer.cfg, and then we're going to take a look at what's in here. So we can enable extra low-level configuration options off. We can use the down arrow on the keyboard to microcontroller architecture. We're going to hit enter, and then we're going to go to ST Microelectronics STM32, and then we're going to look for the processor model. In this case, it is the STM32F103. Yours may be different depending on the configuration and board you have, but this is going to work for us. So we're going to hit OK, and then our bootloader offset is going to be 28, but again, it might be different for yours, so just make sure you look in your configuration file as well. And now communication, this is also important. We're going to have to go to serial on USART1 PA10/PA9, hit enter there, and after that we're going to hit Q here, and then we're going to hit Y, and then we're going to issue the command make. And while it's doing everything it needs to do, we're also going to get another program called CoreFTP. There will be a link in the description for this as well. You can use any FTP client. I just like to use this one because it's easy to set up. Once you download and install CoreFTP, if it's your first time, you'll have nothing here, but if you have stuff already, you can go ahead and click new site, and our new site, just for ease, will be called Ender 3 Pro, and our host/IP, we can go back over here and we can grab it from right there. We're going to put that right there. Our username will be Pi. Password will be the one that you chose during the configuration. All of this can remain as is, and then we can hit connect. Hit yes to that. And now over on this side, and over on the left side, you have your local computer, and over here you have your Raspberry Pi. So what we need to do is go into the Klipper folder, and then we're going to go into out, and from there you can see klipper.bin. So what we need to do is we have to get this onto our computer, so we're going to right click this file and click download. It's going to download into whichever folder that you have selected over here. And in this instance, this is my Ender 3 Pro files folder. You can put it whichever folder you like. Just remember where it is. And now we have to put it onto the micro SD card. So open up your micro SD card, and then even from CoreFTP, you can drag this file and drop it right onto your micro SD card. You can name it whatever you'd like. It can be klipper.bin. If you had Klipper on there already, then it has to be named something else. Or if you flash another file called klipper.bin, you'll have to change it. And if you wanted to update this in the future for any reason, you'd have to rename it anything but klipper.bin. It could be klipper1.bin, just because that's how the Creality motherboards are. So now that we've got this firmware file, all we need to do is pull our SD card out and head back over to the printer. So now that we have our firmware on this SD card, let's plug it into the printer and turn the printer on. One important thing to note before we put the SD card into the main board is you need to disconnect the screen before we flash it. For yours, it's probably going to be somewhere on either side of the printer here, and then you'll just be able to unclick the cable in the back. For this case that I have, I'm going to need to unscrew this and then remove it from here. All right, and under here, you can just disconnect this cable from here or directly from the board. Yours will probably be like this in the back, however your printer's set up. For mine, I'm going to leave this off for now, and eventually I'll probably make a new housing that can comfortably fit the Raspberry Pi in there, and something that doesn't need the screen on top because we'll no longer be using this at all. So for now, I'm going to take the SD card, I'm going to plug it into the main board here, and then we're going to turn the printer on. So I'm going to hit the power button now and see what happens. Fan kicks on and the CRTouch moved as expected, and we have a solid blue light in there. And once you've kind of let it cook for about 30 seconds, you can go ahead and turn the power back off and remove the SD card. We'll remove the SD card now, and you won't be using this SD card slot anymore. All of your files will be uploaded to here. So now we're going to take that OTG cable that came with it, and then we're going to take another micro USB to USB-A cable, and we're going to plug this into here. Alternatively, if you have a micro USB male-to-male connection, then that's going to be best suited, but I don't have one on hand. So the next best thing to do is to plug this into here, and then we're going to plug it into the USB port over here. Now, obviously the printer can't run off of the Raspberry Pi's power supply, but this might happen where the light turns on the CRTouch and the motherboard or the main board turns on as well, but the printer won't function in this state. So what we need to do is we're going to turn the power on to the power supply, and now the fan will kick on because it's getting the proper voltage, and we can head back over to the computer real quick. Back over on the Raspberry Pi here in Mainsail, you might see this come up. So what we can do is click firmware restart, then it's going to try to start everything up, and if everything is going well, you shouldn't see anything going on here. It should present itself almost exactly like it is here. So now what we're going to do is we're going to hit the home button and then go see if the printer homes. So that might happen, that's a possibility as well. That would just mean that the polarity is not set up correctly, especially since I have extension cables running and I kind of forgot about them. So I'm going to go flip that around to tell it that the stepper motor should be turning the other way, so it can hit the Y limit switch back there and not grind away as it was doing. As you saw, we had that little crash, so what we need to do is we're going to go back over to machine, and then we're going to go to printer.cfg. So in the printer.config file, we're going to locate under stepper Y this DIR pin, which just tells the stepper which direction to rotate. Since I have it wired differently, I'm going to put an exclamation point here, which just tells Klipper that, hey, the polarity is reversed on that board. Let's send the motor the other way. So what we're going to do now is hit save and restart, and we shouldn't have any errors here. It looks like we're fine. So let's go back to dashboard and try to home it again. And it looks like the direction is correct. So it looks like there's something funky going on with the CRTouch. So let's go back and see what's going on with that. So for some reason the printer thinks that it's homed, but it's not. So what we need to do is investigate. Again, in my case, the steppers seem to be inverted for Z-axis, which is probably causing that issue. So let's head over to printer.cfg, go over to stepper Z, and then in the DIR pin here, we are going to remove the exclamation point for stepper Z. Yours again may vary depending on how yours is set up as well. So we're going to save and restart, then we're going to go back to dashboard, and then we're going to home all the axes. If your printer just homed like mine just did, then congratulations, you've got Klipper installed. Now there's a couple little things unique to each person's setup, such as their Z-axis offset, as well as if you have a direct drive extruder setup like I do, I'm gonna have to configure some rotation distance and get some things dialed in on mine, but those are all things unique to your printer exactly, especially since nowadays I don't even know if there's any stock Ender 3s out there still. But if there are, that config file that's in the description will probably work just out of the box for you. If you guys want to see a video of what I like to do after a Klipper install, let me know in the comments below. That way we could get you up and running for the best prints possible. So that's going to do it for this video. I want to thank RasTech for doing an awesome job on their kit that they made for this Raspberry Pi 02W. Literally came with pretty much everything I need except a micro USB to micro USB male connection cable and an extra SD card, but otherwise it comes with everything you need to do mostly any project. And if you want all the stuff that you actually need for a Klipper install, there'll be links in the description below of where you can get those products as well. So thank you guys so much for watching. Like the video if you like it, share it with a friend if it might be helpful for them, and remember, as always, keep it foul.